Here we go. Yeah, all right, fair enough. Put it away. Welcome, bienvenue. Welcome once again to Monday. Sales Madness. There we go. And on my right, of course, we have David Treacle-Chunick, and I am the man with many purple hats, Gareth Wax, and we talk about things in sales, hopefully to give you guys a little bit of extra impetus to be able to do it in a slightly different, better, or potentially even more efficient manner. Today is no different. Today's topic is frictionless closing, and of course, I'm passing over to David. What the hell is frictionless closing, David? Sounds looby.
Yeah, well, I mean, you've heard of frictionless shopping, made famous by Amazon. Reducing the number of clicks to be able to, just buy it. It's there. You have to fill in this and send out that and check your shopping cart and, check the delivery address and type in this and all of that kind of stuff just to make it easy. Yeah, they've found, and I think it was Amazon really that sort of pioneered this, not necessarily methodology. People have been trying to do frictionless shopping for ages.
Yeah, but it never was until they did it. It never could really be said frictionless because there was always a sticking point at some point.
Always a sticking point, and you'd get abandoned carts and all of that kind of stuff.
Yep.
So I used to watch all of this. I'm a sales geek, so I read everything about it, watch everything about it, so my clients don't have to. Is how I sort of phrase it. But, I find it genuinely fascinating how people transact. I'm into people transacting business because, ultimately it stops wars. It helps us trade. It's what human beings do to coexist and to collaborate. So, the term frictionless shopping meant how to make that whole thing as just as simple and easy as possible. You told me in the green room just before that you'd made a purchase of a new smoke machine.
I certainly have. Very proudly proud owner.
Right, so then you bought it. You said off a particular provider.
No, we're not going to mention them, please. We want to give them their
provider. It wasn't Amazon.
No.
But again, I would imagine you just tapped a button, confirmed something, and next thing you know, it's arrived at your doorstep and you've been billed.
No, but the problem with that, if I'm without doubling down and saying who they were, it wasn't properly frictionless because it wasn't obvious what the benefits were. I had to do a lot of cross comparison and research to find out whether, because in this particular location, there are a lot of people, a lot of firms on there, all masquerading as shop fronts. And they all, a lot of them appear to be providing similar things. So I had to do a lot of research. So it wasn't frictionless. So there were lots of places where I could have counted myself out. Much hard work. I'll pop down the curries. But instead, I powered through. Now, not everyone is going to do that. And the whole point about frictionless closing, as far as I can see, is that you feel inexorably pulled through to a close. By the time you get to the point, as you refer to it, the anus of the issue, all your misgivings should be gone. And it's just about which method am I going to use to pay for it with?
Well, I mean, you've kind of summed up in a nutshell what I'm talking about. So the frictionless shopping is all about the entire customer journey.
Right.
Okay? The frictionless closing is what happens at the end. And, our regular viewers will know that we predominantly, not just, but predominantly talk about business to business sales. Yeah. So we're selling business services. That's who most of my clients are, who most of your clients are. And that's really our sort of target audience. However, the close in these situations has often come as the culmination of at least a couple of interactions between people. Yeah, we might have, had, I take my events business, which I use very often as a as a case study. I mean, I could use my main business, Treacle, but I'll take my events business. I get an inquiry, and then I qualify them, which basically for me means if they're to go ahead, when would they be going ahead, and in general terms what they're looking for, and about the money, whether they have the budget for it. So they're qualified, and then the qualification means that they're going to get a meeting with me, preferably face to face, unless they're in a different country,
Right.
in Manchester or somewhere like that. But that's my sales process. I have the meeting, I take my notes, I do the close at the meeting. I leave their front door, get in the car, send them the confirmation of the quote, which incorporates some of the notes that I took, so I can demonstrate that I have heard what they're looking for and I know what they want, together with all my standard gubbins, terms and conditions, payment details, and all of that kind of stuff. And then they generally make the payment and book the gig. Yeah, often within 24 hours. So that's kind of like a pretty frictionless close. My counterparts in the events business often don't do that. Often they're having all sorts of conversations in the build up to the close. And then when it comes to the close, they're, even that, there's fraught with phone calls and, are you able to pay this by then, and negotiations, and, we could take a little bit off that and put it on towards, all of that kind of stuff. Right. So some people actually are pretty well equipped to dealing with that. Okay.
Most people aren't actually.
Most people aren't.
No.
And, and so it becomes the normal way to transact business, but it is not necessary to make that the normal way. And when you ultimately go to your AI engineer, your automation person, as I'm sure most people have at least considered if they're not already doing, they're then getting that rather complicated, convoluted process programmed in as their close. Of course, the experience for the buyer is anything but frictionless closing, right? So they are still noticing a significant drop-off of people who they've invested all of this effort into, yes, that sales meeting, but even before that, the money that we spend on marketing and the energy that we expend on networking and all of this kind of stuff, only to lose it right at the last thing. I mean, it's awful. I was with a client yesterday, actually, an accountancy firm. When they get an inbound inquiry, a referral, from a word of mouth referral,
Right.
So they can close now 1 in 2 of those. Pretty good.
Excellent. But how many of those inbounds do they get?
Not as many as not as many of their referrals, not as many referrals as they get inbound inquiries off their website. Right. And off their websites, they're closing about 1 in 10 of those inquiries.
That is what I thought it would be the case.
Okay? So, which is not unusual. It's not unusual.
No.
When I ask people, what is your conversion rates? Very often they imagine it's, I get like 90%. I get 1 in 2. I'm like, okay, show me. It's nothing like that. What they're talking about conversion of.
I mean, they're converting from people who are already pre-sold. So in other words, they come to me and said, I want that, but can I have it in blue? Those are the ones that are converting.
Yeah. And so, but you look at the whole thing, how much are you and who are you investing your time and energy in?
Right.
Yeah. Well, my pipeline might have, 10 people in there, but only one of them is going to convert in that time frame. It's pointless telling me that, well, one day they will become a client. And how long have they been in your pipeline? 3 years. We first spoke to them in 1997. That's not it. That is not it. That means you're still poor every year. Okay. Right. So what we're talking about with frictionless closing is basically to have a proper sales process, a tried and tested, repeatable sales process. that you don't even have to think about as a seller. You don't even have to think about as a buyer, because it's all laid out, right? Culminating to, is it stripping down, the colon of that funnel that, and eventually finds itself in the rectum. And then, and it just slips through. It just slips through. Why does that happen? For some people, it doesn't happen for others. Well, one reason is that some people do qualification. It's all of the stuff right at the beginning. Some people do qualification. Your buyers have to know right at the start that through this process of going through this sales process, ultimately, if there's a fit, I'm going to ask you to become a client. It's going to involve you paying a deposit or paying your first month's fee, which we charge in advance. Yeah. If they know that going into it, and that going into it, it means that the whole sales conversation is geared towards funneling them to that point. Yeah. It doesn't mean that they have to become a client. Yeah. It doesn't mean that you can get to that point. You might say, we also have talked in the green room about our nightmare clients. Right, you might say at the end of it, actually, this is not for me. I'm not going to ask for the close. That's also valid. But if you've done your qualification, it shouldn't even come to that. We should be able to go through a process. That process being typically from the qualification to then understanding the sorts of problems and challenges that are really keeping them up at night. Yeah, the specific problems that are stopping them achieving their goals. What they would consider in an ideal world to be a solution to those problems. How are you going to overcome that in an ideal world? And if you are able then to provide that, you have this vision match, as long as they can see it and you can see it. What is that worth to you, the value part? What would having that solution that you've just described to me, which by the way I think I can do, what would that do for you? Would that really overcome that problem? What would your life be like when you have overcome that problem? Then your close is simply a plan, right? All right, cool. What do we have to do in order for you to become my client, and you can then achieve that?
But very rarely at that point, in my experience, is it a Dutch auction whereby, well, if you shave 5 pence off there, or if it's very rarely about that. At that stage, it could be £5 more, £5 less, and it shouldn't make a difference to it.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a trifle. We talked before about how things like trust can completely override issues of the three traditional variables, which is qualitative things or quality, pricing, and timing. It can, people will sacrifice something on the price in order to be dealing with the person that really they trust, that understands their problems, that understands, what they're trying to achieve, and that has the solutions for them. They will sacrifice the timing. They will wait a little bit longer for a service provider who can really, that they really trust. And, they will even sacrifice on some of the quality.
But the things that can lose the direction on this are often whereby you present it at the beginning as being this easy, frictionless service, and suddenly at the bottom, at the close to the colon end, you start coming out with all this other stuff which creates barriers, and at which point a portion of your potential will go, sod that, I'll go somewhere else that is easier.
Yeah, absolutely. And in business service, particularly in professional services where it's a regulated market, so you might have something like an engagement letter, and if somebody has not bought your services before, your type of services before, they might not be familiar with that buying process, money laundering checks and all that kind of stuff. So, it pays you right at the beginning just to tell them what it would be, as part of the qualification, what would be involved in you buying these services from me or from one of my competitors.
Yeah, I always provide a little mini roadmap at the beginning. I'm even as blatant as to say, look, what we're doing right now is kind of like getting to know you. But if it goes any further, I'm going to lay out a thing that will end up with you paying money. And at the point where you pay money, you should be totally down with what we're going to get. You should have your expectations set up so that you know what you're going to get by the end of the first month, the third month.
Is that the point, Gareth, where you tell them about your working style as well? Because I mean, we've talked as well on this show about your autism and how you have a particular working style that
absolutely.
I say for them in many ways, but they need preparing.
Well, the most important part of my working style is I never sugarcoat the situation. So in other words, if they're not providing me what I needed, I'll say, we cannot give you your service if you don't provide me with X, Y, and Z. Mm-hmm. And there's no point in having this service if you don't provide X, Y, and Z. I've had that many times before. People take us on and then disappear, and we're supposed to make it up. That's the very opposite of what we do. We're supposed to take what they do and amplify.
And by the way, if anybody's watching this on my channel, they don't know what Gareth does. One of the many things he does that he does it beautifully is LinkedIn marketing. He will help you create your LinkedIn profiles. Of course, if you're not telling him, you know, more of the answering the questions, how is it? He's just going to magic one. I got asked the other day to make somebody a logo, and tell me nothing. Tell me the name. That's it. Just make something nice from that. Nah, go away. Can't do it.
No, you need to give me some information about you for me to make a logo that's representative of you. And it's the same with any of these things. So
we go through this process, okay? Right. We go through this process and we arrive then at the fourth stage, or some people call it the fifth stage. So we've done the problem, we've done the solution, we've checked the value, and then we're on to the plan. The closing is the plan. But the closing is not just them necessarily paying a deposit or signing a contract. You might have other things in there. You might require an engagement letter. They might require stuff from you. Or can you just send me those testimonials? Or I want to follow up on some references. Yeah. So tell me those things. And, you know, and there might be some other details depending on your particular industry. You know, can you just show me a little bit of a sample spec that you might have done for somebody else?
Right.
Yeah. Social proofing, that kind of thing. So there might be half a dozen things in there. There might be more. It might be just 2. But, you know, there'll be a few things. And what the idea is that once you've got a tick in the box for all of those things, signed contract, testimonials, then they're a client. Yeah. Then you send them your invoice. Then you start providing your services. So that is, you know, there's a few bits involved, right? How do you make that frictionless? It's not just a case of one tap and you're in. You're not just buying a smoke machine off Amazon. You're selling a business service. So you need to be really careful about making all of that frictionless. For me personally, whilst I'm very good at doing it in my events business, I'm terrible at doing it in my main business, Treacle, right? So that's an area of personal development for me. Okay, but you know, I'm going through, and I have been through that kind of pain, so I share that with my clients and help them not go through the same pain that I had to.
So it's not the case that the cobbler's son runs barefoot, is it? Yeah. So okay, look, thank you very much for watching. I hope you can see, and if you please, I encourage you to go back and watch previous episodes. My VA is putting them all together, and hopefully you'll start seeing some promos about previous episodes and what we've been trying to achieve. The focus of what we're about is to help you do this for yourself better, and the only way you can get there is by if you listen through and you hear some of the points we're trying to make and literally try and employ them within your daily routine. And that could be anything as simple as listening and repeating back verbatim. That could be things such as make sure the process is telegraphed way up front what your process is going to be. Don't hide it. Don't pretend it's something that it isn't. It could be any of these things. If you go back and watch some of our previous episodes, you should get more. And there's plenty more to come. But until next week, David, thank you so much for being part of this. And to you watching, keep your feet on the ground, keep reaching for the stars, and please try and look after that mental health. Bye-bye now.
Thank you.